Note to participants before we begin. All sessions will be available in English or French. To activate translation services, you must set your language preference in Zoom. Today's session will be entirely in English. Therefore, English-speaking participants will not need to activate translation. Now our French translator will share a brief message on this channel in French to provide our French-speaking participants the necessary instructions for activating translation services.
Toutes les sessions seront disponibles en anglais ou en français. La session d'aujourd'hui sera entièrement en anglais. Pour activer les services de traduction, vous devez définir votre préférence linguistique dans Zoom. Si vous regardez actuellement cette session dans la plateforme Hoover, veuillez sélectionner Participer en Zoom. Une fois dans le Zoom, pour configurer la traduction, cliquez sur l'icône du globe terrestre en bas à droite de votre page Zoom. Sélectionnez le canal de la langue souhaitée. Si vous constatez des interférences sonores sur le canal de votre langue, essayez de sélectionner Couper le son original.
Welcome to Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Legume Systems Research, Annual Virtual Convening Day 2. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to continuing our conversation on innovative approaches and discussions on legume systems research. My name is Doreen Gordon, Financial Administrator for the lab. I will be facilitating our session this morning. A few details on our meeting format. You can view this session in the Hoover platform or on the Zoom platform. If you choose to participate in Zoom, please also keep this session open and available in the Hoover platform. This will allow you to participate in Q&A, chat, polls, community, or to access the session agenda, as all of these features are available in Hoover exclusively. I would also like to highlight the community feature. Here you will find additional resources on many topics and be able to engage in ongoing conversations throughout the convening. Please note the chat feature in Zoom has been disabled. At this time, we also ask that you take a minute and click on the polls tab in the Hoover platform and complete our poll of the day, which asks about prepared legume products missing from your marketplace. Results of the poll will be shared in tomorrow's opening session. And now, for the results of yesterday's poll on your favorite legume, with 45% of the vote, common bean sweeps the field, followed by cowpea with 30%, other legumes at 19%, and pigeon pea and mung bean at 4% and 2% respectively. For those of you indicating other legume as your legume of choice, please take a minute and share in the chat exactly which legume is your favorite. And be sure you are subscribed to our Legume Lab newsletter, as each month we feature a different, unique, and tasty legume recipe. We will share the sign-up link in the chat for those of you not yet receiving our monthly newsletter. At this time, Dr. John Mendendorf, Deputy Director of Legume Systems Innovation Lab, will share a few welcoming words, comments on yesterday's sessions, and begin our program for the day.
Thank you, Doreen. We're delighted to be back with you for day 2 of the Legume Systems Innovation Lab, and looking forward to the discussions today. Yesterday, we had 3 great presentations on the results of initial activities and ongoing activities from our implementing partners, among them being SIG-SNAP and her scaling project in West Africa, the Optimizing Shrub System from Ohio State University and Dr. Dick. And then also we had finally the that's Manu Tamo. Sorry, excuse me. Yes, Manu Tamo presented on the IPM strategies for Western Africa using bioagents. So we're delighted, first of all, with the results of the projects that were presented, but also we're really pleased with the interaction that we had as a result of those presentations. And we encourage you today to use the question and answer function frequently in order to bring your questions up and get your answers on some of the projects that we're presenting. So thank you once again for joining us for day 2. We would like to introduce now Dr. Barry Pittendry, who is the director of the Legume Systems Research Innovation Lab, who will introduce the speakers for today's sessions. You, Barry.
Thank you, John.
Merci, John.
Thank you, John. As John mentioned, I'm Barry
Merci, John. Comme John l'a mentionné,
Legume Systems Innovation Lab Director. I would also like to extend a welcome to everyone joining us today. In this session, we will
au cours de cette session,
our research projects and a presentation from a resilience resource team. The format of the session will be a pre-recorded presentation by the project team, followed by a short question and answer period. To submit questions, please use the Q&A feature on the right panel of your convening page during the presentation. Since our Q&A time is very limited, we ask that all participants monitor the Q&A and vote up questions that are of most interest to you by clicking on the thumbs up icon next to the individual question. In the open Q&A session at the end of each presentation, we'll be selecting the questions with the most upvotes for further elaboration. Also, to help us in managing your questions, please preface your question with the alphanumeric designation for the presentation. In this session 2, there will be 4 presentations in this session. So the 4 presentations will be designated 2A, 2B, 2C, and 2D. Please list the corresponding alphanumeric at the beginning of your question. It will provide the corresponding alphanumeric designation for each presentation, or I will provide that. Our first presentation is actually measuring cowpea consumption. This project was an initial activity of the Legume Lab and is concluding its research activities. This project is led by Dr. Mark Maneri of Washington University in St. Louis, but presenting today from Mark Maneri's team is Dr. Megan Callahan-Gillespie. The Q&A designation for this project is 2A. Again, it's 2A. And I'll just turn it over to the team members to begin that process of running the video. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Megan Callahan-Gillespie, and I'm here today on behalf of Dr. Mark Maneri and the Maneri Research Lab at Washington University in St. Louis. Today, we'll be talking about a quick start project on a cowpea biomarker study that was conducted in Ghana. First, I want to start with a little bit of background information for the rationale for this project, which is to move nutrition, specifically cowpea nutrition, into the 21st century. You'll see I have a quote on the slide that says, "No science achieves maturity without precision data." Nutrition is the science of food, but we can't reliably measure food intake. In order to interpret the effect of diet or food on health, it is critical to accurately measure an individual or a population's dietary intake. Today, we often use self-reported dietary assessment methods, which include food frequency questionnaires, dietary recalls, weighted food records. These methods have so many limitations. They're high in cost, they're time-consuming, they involve participant recall bias, there's measurement errors, there's often misreporting or underreporting of dietary intake, and difficulty determining accurate portion sizes. Just imagine trying to understand diabetes without being able to accurately measure blood sugar. This is what we're talking about when we say we need precision data. We need a reliable measurement for dietary intake. The discovery of dietary biomarkers is an area of increasing interest. Today, there are only a few biomarkers for dietary assessment that are well established. This study has the potential to benefit future nutrition and education-related programs, policies, and research across multiple disciplines by offering a quantitative measure of intake with the identification of a cowpea biomarker. This precision data will reduce the time, effort, and inconsistencies related to subjective dietary intake methods, and most importantly, advance our understanding of the relationship between diet, or in this case, cowpeas, and health. So you might be wondering, what's the deal with cowpeas? Well, in 2016 and 17, after we conducted a study in rural Malawi among infants who received one of 3 daily supplements, a common bean flour, a cowpea flour, and a corn soy blend control, we found that the cowpea supplement resulted in less linear growth faltering. This was encouraging because up until this point, there had not been interventions to show a reduction in stunting in the context of rural Africa. And because cowpeas grow well in Africa and they're culturally accepted, plus they're a hardy, drought-tolerant crop, we had even more hope that our findings may provide an affordable and accessible solution to vulnerable children in Africa. But since cowpeas are grown mostly in the African continent, we know that they have not been studied as extensively as legumes in North America, such as soy. So this is novel work that will be vital in linking cowpea consumption to human nutrition. So our quick start proposal was titled Measuring Cowpea Consumption in Infants and Pregnant Women in Ghana. And as I said before, this study aim was a reliable and convenient way to measure the quantity of cowpea that was being consumed by an individual. And our objective was to identify a novel set of dietary biomarkers that will measure cowpea consumption and be free from participant recall bias and serve as a way for us to quantify this legume intake. In other words, our objective was precision data. So now let's move into the methods. First, I want to talk a little bit about our study timeline. All of the study data that was collected in the field was collected between August and September of 2019, so pre-COVID. All pictures are from pre-COVID times. We had 40 study participants enrolled into the study, 20 children between the ages of 9 and 21 months, and 20 pregnant women that were older than 18 years. Participants consumed measured amounts of cowpeas in increasing quantities, starting with a period of no cowpeas. I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail on the next slide. We collected urine samples and blood spots, and urine samples underwent metabolite detection via ultra-performance liquid chromatography tandem mass spectrometry. Here you will see an outline of the 4 5-day phases of the study. As I said before, we started with a washout period where no cowpea was consumed. This was followed by gradual increases in the amount of cowpea consumed throughout the remainder of the study. Both pregnant women and infants came to a common location every day during the study period to either answer questions or receive their pre-portioned amount of cowpeas. This way, we could observe that the cowpeas were being consumed and recorded appropriately. So now we're going to start looking at the data. So we'll start with the PCA plots of the foods that were consumed. We have 4 cowpea varieties that we use for our biomarker study, and then we also have navy bean on this plot for comparison purposes. And this is the metabolite profiling done on the foods before they are consumed by a human. So these are the molecules that you would find in the food ingredient themselves. And you can see the purple up there is the navy bean by the legend. And then there's a cluster of 3 of the cowpea varieties down at the bottom. And then on the left, you have the orange, which is another cowpea variety. And this is revealing that there's molecular differences between legume types, obviously between the cowpea and the navy bean, but there's also differences even within the same legume and the different varieties. So with the 3 cluster cowpea varieties at the bottom, we see that we would likely have some overlap there, and there would be something to identify cowpea in general. So here we are looking at the differences between children and women, and we have PCA plots of all diets and all dying points. And what we want to show here is that when we look at all of the small molecules found both in pregnant women and children, we have 2 distinct sets that are found specific for the child or the pregnant women. So you can see the red is for the children and the green is for the pregnant women. So this is not so much unexpected, as we know that the metabolic response to any dietary intervention among these populations is going to be a little bit different, given that they're going through different things and are in a different physiological state. But we were hoping that we would have one universal magic biomarker. But since we don't see that the colored circles are overlapping, it's likely that the biomarker won't be there for both pregnant women and children together. So now we're going to look at the urine metabolomes in 2 different time points, the washout and the high consumption, and we're going to look at women and children that are analyzed separately. So here we're looking at the PCA plot of the washout period and the high consumption period for 2 of the cowpea varieties, the Dagbantua and the Sangui. And because I don't want to continue to mispronounce those, we will call those the DS variety. In red, we have the high consumption, and in green, we have the washout. And what we're looking for here is to see if the small molecules found in the urine during the high consumption period are different than in the washout period. And we are looking at that in both children and in pregnant women. And this next slide is very similar to the previous slide, except that we're looking at 2 other varieties of cowpea, the Tukara and the Adua, or the TA varieties. But again, we're looking at women, pregnant women and children separately, and we have the high consumption as the red and the green as the washout period. And we want to see if there are small molecules found in the high consumption period that are not found in the washout period. So we're looking for the lack or the absence of overlap. Here we have another visual looking at shared metabolites when comparing the urine molecules found in those that consumed the different varieties of cowpeas. We see that we're comparing and seeing if there's overlap between the pregnant women and children. And we see with those that consume the DS varieties, there are 2 common elements, and among those that receive the TA varieties, there is 1 common element. So now we have candidate cowpea biomarkers. First, we have our cowpea general consumption biomarkers. And this category includes phytochemicals unique to plants, such as quinic acid, other general biomarkers that tell us what the effect of cowpea is in human metabolism, such as carnites, which are antioxidants and necessary for energy transfer. And this gives us a little insight into how cowpeas strengthen human nutrition. The variety-specific biomarkers are useful if we wanted to test a certain variety that was being consumed, or perhaps there was a new variety, or we had a variety that we knew had a specific advantage or benefit. Now, you might be thinking, aren't there thousands of different small molecules in cowpeas? Keep in mind that PCA plots, which is what we've been looking at, just tell us the difference between people consuming cowpea and people not consuming cowpea. And while thousands of different molecules are put into the gut by eating cowpea, there are not thousands of molecules in urine to detect. This is because resident in our gut are a multitude of microorganisms that eat up any organic matter that's not absorbed by the human as nutrients. They transform this organic matter to functional biological molecules. This is a very efficient way to fully utilize the food that's being consumed. It also makes looking for a biomarker kind of difficult, as it cleans up all the traces, or what we thought would be the traces, of cowpea and what we hope to detect. So while our first idea was that we would find something unique, like a molecule in a cowpea that wasn't in any other plant and was stable and appearing in the urine, no such molecule seemed to exist. But that doesn't mean we weren't successful in identifying a biomarker. Here you'll see a figure with orange and blue bars, one for pregnant women and one for children. The orange represents the high consumption diet, and the blue represents the washout. The biomarker that we discovered is a set of small molecules that change in a certain coordinated pattern with respect to each other. This is a suite of molecules, and it replaces our original desire for a unique singular molecule. You'll see it here on this slide for the TA varieties, but we also found it in the DS varieties. So we have both biomarkers for both pregnant women and children, and biomarkers based on the different cowpea varieties. As I'm just about to hit my time requirement, I did want to make sure I had a few closing remarks. First, the pairwise comparisons for both pregnant women and children within each diet did demonstrate a suite of metabolite biomarkers for cowpeas. This is a huge success. Our next step will be to quantify these biomarkers in a larger sample set with commercial standards. Unfortunately, currently, with the situation outside of our control due to COVID, commercial standards have been hard to come by. But I'm not worried. I know that as soon as we can get our hands on those commercial standards, we'll move forward with our next steps. And finally, I wanted to say we will achieve the goal of precision nutrition. But it's going to require continued efforts to develop, validate, and refine assessment methods that can capture the multidimensional nature of the human diet. And finally, I wanted to make sure to acknowledge all of those who this project would not have happened without, especially those at the University of Ghana, Professor Steiner Asidu and Professor Salia, as well as our collaborators at Colorado State University, Elizabeth Ryan, of course, my colleagues in the Maneri Lab at Washington University, and without the generous funding from USAID Global Food Security and the ongoing support from the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Legume Systems Research. We appreciate all of our collaborators and collaborations. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I now welcome Dr. Callahan Gillespie and hopefully Mark Maneri, who is trying to call in from Africa, to answer the session questions. I'll be assisted by Legume Lab Research Manager Deepa Thranjan, who will present the questions. Thank you, and take it away, Deepa. Thanks.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Megan, and I understand that PI Mark will also be joining in.
Did we lose Deepa?
I
Oh, there you go.
think
Go
we
ahead.
might have.
You draw.
I apologize. My Hoover platform crashed. I apologize. So I understand, I have posed a couple of questions. So if you don't mind, Megan, can I quickly start you on this? And this question is more on the research design itself. How did you all determine the low, medium, large portions of the cowpea intake and the forms that the cowpea was administered? It looks like they were boiled beans from the images. And then did you screen for any of the heavy metals and aflatoxins? And did you ask the participants to refrain from consuming other legumes?
Okay, these are excellent questions. So first, with the different quantities of legumes, we started by doing a in-depth community survey focus group with mothers and children to see what quantities they were consuming in a meal. So so these were based on, like, the large quantity amount was what was feasibly consumed in a meal. So we went down from there to do the small, medium, large. And then we did not test for any of the heavy metals or aflatoxins. And for your question, we did have them refrain from other legumes such as common bean or CSB for the period of the study, just to have it a little bit more controlled. And so then they received, as I said, every day they went to a site to receive their cooked quantity, pre-cooked quantity, and they were prepared based on our formative research that we did regarding the ideal cooking methods and how they would be served in a special sauce and so forth.
So a quick follow-on question, if I may. Were the children told to refrain from participating in the school feeding programs, which is very common in these parts of the world?
So these were again children between 9 and 21 months, so they weren't in any school feeding programs. It was before school age. So
they were not part of any supplemental.
No, and they couldn't be. They were not eligible if they were, for instance, on some sort of supplemental food for malnutrition.
Okay. I have one additional question, but I'll pause and request either Barry or someone else to let me know if there are any additional questions in the chat box, because I don't have access to it right now.
Yes, okay. I have a question here. How much will this cost to implement in practice? Can it be done in the context of a normal household survey?
I saw that question, and it's a good question. I think overall, again, this was a discovery of some sort, because this is a new science. So when I asked Dr. Maneri on chat just now, while I saw that question, because I wanted to be prepared to answer it, he estimated it would probably be around $8 per person that you were testing. But again, this is only testing for one food. So in a normal household survey, you would want to, you might have multiple food biomarkers you'd be testing for, things that you would know would, give you some sort of nutritional benefit. And so it's possible, though, that when a program of this or a biomarker discovery gets scaled up even larger, it could get cheaper because you'd have more participants. So maybe up to, down to $2 per food, I guess you'd be detecting in the urine. So the idea would be that if we move to precision nutrition, we have biomarkers for each, legume and each protein or animal source food and each of the leafy greens that we know vitamins come from and so forth. And so we're moving there, and that's going to take time. And obviously the cost will be reduced as we get more, fine-tuned in those biomarkers and so forth.
Thank you, Megan. That was very useful to know, and I'm glad that Jan posed that question. Omics is where everything is right now, and this is a great example that illustrates the convergence of metabolomics and genomics and proteomics. So on that thought, in addition to the the applications that you elucidated, to assess compliance to cowpea food interventions in any future clinical trials, could this also extend to guide any future selections or screening of locally available whole staple foods, commonly consumed foods that are nutritionally rich and rich in micronutrients, certainly, and other bioactives that you can use to guide to improve health and ultimately reduce stunting in children. I'm trying to project what additional potential applications might come out of this.
Yes, I think there's a lot of applications, and as you said, omics is a very up and coming and kind of the I don't want to say fad, because I like the word precision nutrition, because it's really moving us into that area of, and I do think that you can look at markets and test things that beans and things, and you can find in the household then what is actually being consumed, and then hopefully maybe do social marketing to encourage that consumption and so forth. So yeah, it is helping us move into making these homegrown interventions more accessible, and kind of where we want to move the intervention to more consumption of that food.
Perfect. And that ends our, oh, go ahead, Barry.
I'd just like to add, Megan, I think what is incredibly exciting about this and sort of that broad long-term issue is that when these techniques are really, well worked across multiple food groups, understanding what's going on in a community from a metabolomics perspective, and then correlating to other health outcomes, like as reduction of stunting, better gut health. There's just incredible potential in the long term to understand what combinations of foods ultimately lead to best health outcomes. And so I think it's incredibly exciting work. So I really appreciate your time out today to present on it. So, I taught metabolomics for many years to 200 level students, and I am really appreciative to see a great example of how it can be used in very practical terms for health outcomes. So thank you. And when I have to teach metabolomics again, you will be an example. So at your project.
Great,
so thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
It's truly a research for development project that you've illustrated. This concludes our Q&A for 2A. Over to you, Barry.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Callahan Gillespie. It's highly appreciated, your presentation today. And again, thank you for your exciting outcomes. So our next presentation is development of market-driven improved cowpea varieties using mature markers. This project is ongoing and is led by Dr. Phil Roberts, University of California at Riverside. So presenting today is Dr. Phil Roberts. The Q&A session for this project will be 2B. So go ahead and we can play the video and then follow up with a question and answer session afterwards. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. This is Phil Roberts from the University of California, Riverside. Wishing we could be together in person, but planning to share with you our project virtually. We are working under Area of Interest 1, our project's 1.1, and we are looking at development of market-driven improved cowpea varieties for West Africa using mature markers. And so I'm going to click through some of the basis of our project and share with you some progress. So our geographic focus is West Africa. We have 3 participating host countries, Burkina Faso, Ghana, and Senegal. And I'd like to introduce our team together with myself. We have Bo Lam Hun and Tim Close as co-PIs here at UC Riverside. And then our host country partners are Joseph Battiano at INRA, based in Camboense, Burkina Faso, Francis Kusi with CSIR Sari in Tamale, Ghana, and Musa Dianga, our Senegal co-PI, and formerly our good friend and colleague Diarga Cisse, who are based at ISRA in Bambey, Senegal, and also with Seras at Thiès, Senegal. So that's our team. And our overall project goal is to look towards secure harvest, stabilize food supply, and improve rural incomes for the legume communities in Western Africa. And our focus is on high yielding and market preferred cowpea varieties that have good local availability, utilized by women, men, and young farmers, and also the actors along the value chain for cowpea. Just a couple of background considerations. For cowpea in the Sudano-Sahel production region of West Africa, cowpea is highly nutritious legume, vital to food security, especially for women and children. It complements dietary cereals. Unfortunately, the typical smallholder farmer yields are little more than 20% of the known yield potential. Excuse me, and insects, pathogens, parasites, drought, poor fertility soils are major contributing factors to this low yield. We're focused on using downstream breeding with SNP marker haplotypes as an approach to improve yield performance. We're not developing new marker systems. We're using existing marker knowledge and technology. And the focus here is two-pronged. One, looking at application of markers linked to target traits to add to currently available elite popular local varieties on the one hand, and then to use the technology to select among existing advanced lines and populations the best yielding and grain type varieties for release potential. We also have a capacity building effort in the area of graduate degree training in breeding and genetics, and then short-term ongoing training of the neuroscientists in molecular breeding. And I'll share a bit more about these main points in a minute. Three overall objectives to the project: applying the marker systems to add traits to elite varieties and lines, so existing varieties. Second area is field performance, to test improved lines in support of the variety release process. And then under objective 3, apply markers for quality assurance of new and current variety seed stock purity. So I'll just cover through some of the cover through some of the progress. Our project actually started, the funded part of our project started in spring of last year, 2020. So we have yet to complete a full funded year on the project, but I'll take you through some of the progress that we've made so far. First of all, we completed identifying local varieties for improvement in the host countries. And secondly, we then used the genotyping technology to verify and select for plants within the lines that have strong background purity, that are pretty much homozygous. And so underneath here, for the 3 host countries, we have listed the 3 elite varieties in each of the countries. The names are maybe not so important at this point of discussion. And then the various traits that we're looking at introducing with marker-assisted back crossing. So you can see large seed, insect disease, Macrophyllina disease, and Striga, the parasitic weed resistances to those, focus in Burkina. In Ghana, again, we have aphid and striga resistance, large seed, earliness in a couple of varieties, and in Senegal, insect and disease resistance and large seed in the case of Pacao, which is a popular variety that was released from the Legume Innovation Lab efforts. So just to focus a little more then on progress in 2020 and then our plans coming up for this year and the following year in 2022. This is the area of adding traits to these targeted varieties using marker-assisted backcrossing, or MABC. And so we have a stepwise plan for this. In 2020, where we kicked off the effort, crosses were made to develop F1 progenies at UCR, so we've completed that. Then crosses were made to develop the first backcross generation, so F1 crossed with recurrent parent. This was done in the host countries, or attempted in the summer of 2020. This effort was completed in Ghana, not yet completed in Burkina and Senegal due to issues of rain events and heat in Senegal, which suppressed reproductive development of plants. So we're looking at then having first backcross generation moving to 2021 this year. We will complete the backcross one generation development, and then all the BC ones will be genotyped at UCR. And this process I've highlighted in the next bullet point here, where we use the genotyping information to make background and foreground selection decisions to select best plants for them to then be used to cross back into the recurrent parent. And so this will then produce the second backcross generation. These second backcross generation will be grown out in the summer of 2021. And then the cycle continues. We genotype, use the data to select the best plants, and make the third backcross generation. Our host country partners will be making the backcross generations. Here at UCR, we will focus on the genotyping and selection process. We'll grow out backcross 3 generation plants in the fall of 2021, and then genotype and select. And then here at the end of 2021, I've highlighted again in bold, this is where we would then, with the backcross 3, we will start to intercross plants within that generation to stack the QTLs or traits to form combined or C1 backcross 3 generation indicated here. So this is an effort where we then put together the large seed QTLs with the insect and macrophyemina and striga resistance QTLs. So we end up with elite lines with combination. So in the out year 2022 here, we'll be then taking those combined backcross generation, genotyping, selecting, harvesting, so taking it to the F2. And this F2 advanced generation then will be used to select plants where all the QTLs are fixed, and we can then take those forward for final development and release. So here's a couple of views of this in MABC in progress. Here's back cross 1 generation materials in a UC Riverside greenhouse this last year, materials from Ghana, ready for leaf collection for marker genotyping. And just another view of MABC in action. This is actually from material in summer 2014, where we've used MABC to develop aphid-resistant California blackeye, a new blackeye. So in photo A here, there's a high density of these back-cross plants grown. They're then genotyped, and most are kicked out or removed, and the few that are the selected plants remain that then we can take to the next generation. And I just digress for a moment here. One of the really positive outcomes of our previous Legume Innovation Lab efforts, which we have now finished off in 2020, is that we have prepared for release of a new aphid-resistant blackeye variety, CB27, for growing in California for the US production market. It has 2 aphid resistance QTLs from an African line and has beautiful seed here. Bottom right, you can see brighter, whiter seed than the current main variety grown. So here's an outcome of USAID investment along with California bean industry investment. So here we are, progress. One area where a second objective, 2.2, we're evaluating Mars, magic, and super magic population lines in host country fields. And we started this in June 2020. Here are shots in Ghana, Burkina, and Senegal, where we're trying to select the best lines together with marker technology information for some of these to be potentially released. So this is capitalizing on previous investment. I just wanted to touch on the fact that in terms of training activities, we're focused on student and staff training using the marker system technology as a training tool for molecular breeding, both for graduate students, and we have 3 started in the program, 2 in Ghana, 1 in Burkina, and also for training the NARS scientists. So we're working on that. Our training for women farmers based on field days and farmer participatory variety selection activities got a little bit messed up because of the pandemic, but this is an area that we'll push on and can talk more about. I just wanted to finish up with a cross-cutting theme project that we've started, which is based on cowpea nutrition. And here we're looking at nutrient status of these breeding materials that I've shared with you, with a view to using the nutrient status information to make informed decisions about release. So we will use the nutrient knowledge that's being developed. Lines have already been grown in 2020, and have those feed into sensory evaluation, panel taste testing, and cooking time tests in each host country, and follow that up with an educational program. So we're just getting started on this. Grain samples have been produced in 2020 to get this project underway, and the nutrient assays will be conducted this spring. And here just a shot that shows within a multi-parent cowpea population for protein, calcium, iron, zinc, sugar content, we have tremendous variation in these nutrients within cowpea and within some of our population material. So a great opportunity to select for enhancing nutrient status. So we're looking at main outputs from the project in two areas, both the technologies in terms of varieties released and integrated into seed systems, and then our capacity building. So with that, I'll finish. Thanks so much for your time.
Great. Thank you very much, Phil, for the presentation. I'll now welcome Dr. Roberts to the session to answer questions, and Deepa will also join and help answer these sets of questions, or work with Phil on addressing these questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Barry. So the participants reminding that the question designation would be 2B for this particular session. And there are some questions already. Phil, in the interest of time, I'm going to pose you the most upvoted question. This is from our very own Daniel Bailey from USAID. Do you think you will reach registration with any of the newly improved varieties by the end of this innovation lab, Legumes Innovation Lab?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dan, and it's always a challenge recognizing that the the breeding process is a stepwise one that I laid out. I think our hope is that we be, particularly under Objective 1, where we're taking already existing elite lines that are popular and adding traits, the release process should be simpler and more streamlined than if we're starting off with something very different or very new. Where we'll end up relative to the end of the project is not completely clear at the moment. I think we'll be very close if we're not actually processing release documentation by the end of the project. So I think realistically we have about a 3-year horizon to get to the point of at least near release. So that would be my best estimate. I did highlight the California variety, which will impact US agriculture, that's under release consideration now. So yeah, it's a challenge. The selections out of the Magic and Mars populations, I'm sure will not actually be released by the end of this project period, but we will have the best candidates identified. So.
Thank you, Phil. We have actually approached our end time for the Q&As. I would encourage Phil and others involved in this project to go back to the Whova platform. And
so I'd just like to thank Phil for the presentation and for answering that question. And I just would like to say this is an excellent example of exciting work that ultimately has pragmatic implications in US agriculture too. So I think I really appreciate you adding that extra information in. And in the long term, this is incredibly important work to help us manage biotic stresses on cowpea cropping systems, and becomes important, very important tool sets in the management of those biotic challenges. So just like to thank Phil for his Phil and his team for their ongoing work. Thank you. Just come back on here. So thank you, Dr. Roberts. Our next presentation is Sustainable Intensification of Dual-Purpose Cowpea Varieties for Enhanced Food and Fodder in Senegal. This project is ongoing and led by Dr. Augustine Ubar of Kansas State University, and he will be presenting this today. And the Q&A designation for this project is 2C. So I'll just pass this over to the team to begin the process of running the video. Thanks.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the
Merci
2021
joindre
Convening
cette réunion mondiale.
Lab for Legume Systems Research. My name is Augustine Obo, soil scientist with Kansas State University. Today, I'll be sharing with you some information on our project looking at sustainable intensification of dual-purpose cowpea varieties for enhanced food and fodder in Senegal. This is a collaborative research effort between scientists at Kansas State University, including myself and Dr. Vera Prasad, and our colleagues at Senegalese Agricultural Research and Extension Services. The research efforts in Senegal is being led by Dr. Ali Fayel. Our project is focused on cowpea, and cowpea, as we know, is a very important grain legume crop that is well adapted to the savanna regions in West Africa. Cowpea is normally grown as an intercrop with cereal grains like millet and sorghum. Unfortunately, yields of local varieties are very low, ranging between 300 to 400 kilograms per hectare. Because of this, there have been a lot of efforts looking at plant breeding to get new varieties with greater yield and also drought tolerance. One of the research efforts looking at improvement in cowpea production is the development of dual-purpose cowpea varieties. The picture on my right is an example of a dual-purpose cowpea variety. These varieties have stay grain property at maturity. As you can see here, all the above ground biomass of this variety is looking green. So this increases the amount of forage available for livestock that could be used as a livestock feed. And also because they are green, we have green leafy materials, the forage quality is significantly improved. And this is very important for the integrated crop livestock systems that we have in the savanna regions of West Africa. So the overall goal of this project is to look at sustainable intensification of agropastoral systems and how we can increase adoption of high-yielding dual-purpose cowpea varieties, and also provide agronomic management practices that will support cowpea production. We have two main objectives. The first objective is to evaluate the dual benefits of cowpea varieties to increase both grain and forage quality and quantity. And the second objective was to conduct a trade-off assessment for cowpea markets with particular focus on trade-offs and synergies between grain and forage production in areas that are traditionally pastoralist compared to areas that traditionally grow cowpea. This project is focused in Senegal, particularly the Senegalese peanut basin. We are looking at 3 precipitation gradients, the Loga region, all the way to the Kaffrine region that gets about 700 millimeters of rainfall. These 3 regions were selected because of their proximity to the Feed the Future zone of impact. This region also is the major cowpea production area in Senegal. So these 3 regions has most of the cowpea production in Senegal. In addition, ISRA has research facilities that are located within this region. So we have access to these facilities to use in the conduct of our research. In terms of methods, we are using the mother baby trial approach, which is a bi-directional learning approach between scientists, farmers, and extension agents. Last year in 2020, we started these experiments. by conducting crop variety trials across 3 locations in Senegal. We have 5 new cowpea varieties. We also included 2 older varieties, example Yasin, and then we have 6 dual purpose cowpea varieties, including Bombay, Moredi, Dolgama, and we also have 7 dual purpose cowpea varieties that we got from University of California cowpea breeding program. We are looking at 2 fertility levels, whether we apply fertilizer to boost cowpea production or no fertilizer at all. Then we are also looking at residue management, whether we incorporate the cowpea residue after harvest or we remove all the residue, and what will be the impact on nutrient availability for the subsequent crop. These pictures were taken about, the picture on my left was about 2 to 3 weeks after cowpea has been planted in August, and then the picture on my right is 1 month after cowpea has been planted. And these pictures are looking very good because last year we have a significant amount of rainfall that helps in improving cowpea productivity. We are also looking at genotype by environment, by management study that we are conducting at these 3 locations. This is a split plot design. The main plots are sole or intercrop cowpeas. Then we also have 10 cowpea varieties as the subplot factor. These 10 cowpea varieties include the 5 new varieties that have been released. We also have 2 older varieties that are included in this research, and we are adding 3 varieties of cowpea from the material that we got from University of California. Then we have 5 agronomic treatments, which are basically soil fertility management. We are looking at a control where we apply 30 kilogram phosphorus. We are also having a treatment of 30 MPK. And then we have a treatment where we are applying 2.5 tons per hectare manure and 30 kilogram nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium per hectare. So we are looking at how these management practices affect cowpea production. The picture to my left is 1 block of these treatments. So the first block, you will see a sole cowpea treatment, and behind that, we have the intercrop treatment. So this year, we will be rolling out the baby trials. This is kind of an on-farm research based off from the results from last year. So the treatment that will be compared will be farmer practice to our dual purpose cowpea varieties. We are going to recruit about 100 farmers near each mother trial. And this will be done with the help of extension agents. So we are going to take into consideration the gender of the farmers that will be recruited, ethnic balance. We also make sure there's a lot of youth involvement in this research. So the mother-baby trial, in this case, producers are able to see what is happening on the mother trial on station at a particular location and compare what is happening in the mother trial to the trial that is being conducted on farm by the producer himself. In terms of data collection, we are going to collect data on grain yield, forage yield. We also measure grain quality and forage quality in both the baby and mother trials. In addition, the baby trials, we are going to do cooking time, test assessment. We also look at seed color and nutrient density. We also take socioeconomic data from the producers. We also take surveys on cowpea forage markets, and this data will be used for trade-off analysis between dual-purpose cowpea and local varieties. On the mother trial side, we will take data on leaf area index, soil water content, chlorophyll indices. We also measure soil nutrient availability, take crop phenology data that will be helpful in conducting modeling work in later part of the study. And then we also conduct economic analysis for both the mother trials and the baby trial. We are still compiling the data that we collected from this field, but I would like to share some preliminary data from this study. So the graph on my left side is forage yields from these varieties, cowpea varieties in Bombay. And the x-axis is cowpea varieties, and then the y-axis is our forage yield. The last bar is Yasin, which is the older variety. As you can see from here, yields of most of the new varieties were greater than Yasin, which is the older variety. When you go to the other location, Bali, even though we did not see any significant difference in terms of forage yield between the treatments, Yasin still produced the lowest yield compared to the other varieties. This graph shows 2020 forage yield at Bombay. Here I'm showing more varieties on the x-axis. So we're showing our 5 new varieties plus 3 other varieties that we had this year. And then the last 2 bars are the 2 older varieties, Malak and then Yasin. As we can see from here, the yields of most of the new cowpea varieties were significantly greater than the older variety Yasin. And also Leona produced significantly greater forage yield compared to the other varieties. So we are seeing some interesting results that some of the varieties are doing very well. So this is very promising that we will be able to identify some dual purpose cowpea varieties that could be used by producers to boost both grain and forage production. In terms of capacity building, the mother-baby trials provide a very good opportunity to train both extension agents and farmers. The picture on my left is a typical production field where they are growing local varieties. These local varieties you see at the point of physiological maturity, they try to shed their leaves, and they are also the leaves also turn yellow or brown. So the forage productivity is very low. Also, this local variety doesn't have vigorous growth, so you can see a lot of weed pressure compared to the picture on my right, which is a dual purpose cowpea variety who tend to stay green at the point of maturity, and it has very vigorous growth, so it covers a lot of surface area, reducing the amount of light on the soil surface, and that reduces the amount of weeds in the plot. So this is very significant. It can help in reducing the cost of weeding, and that can save the producer money if you have a dual purpose variety that has very vigorous growth. We also training graduate students. We recruited 1 PhD student and 1 MSc student this year. We advertised this widely. In Senegal, we had about 15 applicants for the MSc, 15 applicants for the PhD, and then the postdoc, we have 4 applicants. We set up a panel of 4 scientists from ISRA and screened the applicants. So after screening, we shortlisted 5 candidates for each category, and we interviewed them via Zoom. So based on the interview that I did with Dr. Faye and myself, we were able to select candidates for the MS, PhD, and the postdoctoral position. So the selected candidate for the PhD position is Mr. Tolkani, who will be trained in Senegal. Mr. Bruno for MSc, he will be trained at KSU, and our postdoctoral associate is Dr. Aplu. All these candidates have been informed of the outcome of the interview, and they will be soon joining our research efforts in Senegal. In terms of expected outcome, we are hoping that by the end of this project, we will be able to use dual purpose cowpea varieties to sustainably intensify agro-pastoral systems in West Africa. There will also be improvement in smallholder farmer income. We will also be able to increase adoption of dual purpose grain and forage cowpeas in Senegal and surrounding West African countries. We are also hoping there will be improvement in human nutrition with the adoption of nutrient-dense dual purpose cowpea varieties. Finally, you will be able to train and build institutional capacity in cropping systems through graduate student training and also training of producers and extension agents using the mother-baby trials. I would like to thank the USAID and the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Legume System Research for funding this project. I would like to end here and thank you very much for listening.
Great. Thank you, Augustine, and I'll pass it over to you to to handle questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry, and thank you, Augustine. Excellent presentation. We have a couple of questions, and I'll field the first one to you. In Mozambique, cowpea is grown mostly for home consumption. How volumes are traded, and low volumes are traded, and there's a dominance of informal market. What experiences from other regions and your project can be applied to increase cowpea productivity and commercialization?
Well, that's an excellent question. It may be similar situation in most West African countries where cowpeas are mostly consumed in the household, but there's also in places like Niger where most of the cowpeas are sold across the border in Nigeria. They produce a lot, and then they also sell some and buy other stuff from Nigeria. So with our project, we are looking at the cropping systems approach, looking at how we can improve the grain and also the fodder. So forages are a very important part of the project. So if we are able to identify something that can produce more fodder, then there will be more market for it that they can sell and generate more income. And if they can use the grain to feed the household, and then the forage can be sold in the market.
Indeed, and this is a good segue to the next question. Have you done any gender analyses about women versus men preferences, grain versus fodder?
Yeah, thank you. This is going to be part of the project that we're working on. We haven't done that yet, but this is going to be part of the surveys that we will be doing as part of this project. So it will be a major component of the work.
All right. I don't know if there are any additional questions. I have one in terms of the fodder. We know that cowpea as a bean is very highly valued for its grain, but also for its hulms, which is a tradable commodity in fodder markets. And say like in northern Nigeria, surveys have shown, the fodder market surveys have shown that groundnut hulms fetch really high price because of their nutritive value. So looking at the cowpeas, is there an economic value for cowpea breeders or other livestock nutritionists to look at or explore hulm fodder traits as an additional selection and breeding criteria?
Thank you. And I think that is part of this work. So we are looking at the forage nutritive value. So if we measure those and be able to identify varieties that have higher forage nutritive value, that will be a plus for what we are doing. So it's part of the work. So we are looking at both fodder and then also the grain quality. So it's going to be part of the work.
Wonderful. Thank you. That concludes our Q&A session for this particular research. Over to you, Barry.
So thank you very much, and thank you for that excellent presentation. I think it represents a great example of some unintended consequences, especially around the issue of reduced need for weeding, and that I think it's very some very exciting unintentional outputs from the work that have potential real long-term ramifications for people in cropping systems. So we will now move to a presentation by the Resource Resilience Team, or RRT, as they are known. The RRT is an innovative approach to address cross-cutting thematic issues developed by our Legume Systems Innovation Lab. I also encourage you to submit questions during their presentation, as they will be available for live Q&A session immediately following. And the Q&A designation for this project is 2D. Again, it's 2D. So thank you very much, and I'll pass this over to our team that can now play the video. Thanks.
Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants attending this session. My name is Jane Payumo, and I'm the Monitoring and Evaluation Lead for the Legume Systems Research Innovation Lab. I'm also a faculty member at Michigan State University and head of the Research Evaluation and Data Analytics team supporting AgBio Research, which is the research arm of the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources at MSU. You heard from our director yesterday in the opening session. My role today is to provide an overview of the cross-cutting areas that have an impact on the implementation of Legume Lab funded activities and how the lab is mainstreaming cross-cutting issues. I will also help moderate this session this morning. I'd like to begin this presentation with the theory of change, or TOC for short, the framework that guides the vision for the lab. As shown, the lab TOC begins with a set of critical inputs. These inputs include the management entity at Michigan State in partnership with USAID, local and international partners, network of researchers, and the global legume community. The collaborative learning and adapting, or CLA for short, approach, combined with prior needs assessments and USAID resources, makes key program activities possible for the lab. This investments in targeted research and a balanced legume systems research portfolio are hoped to result in gender and youth responsive, nutrition-sensitive outputs, supporting the resilience of the legume value chain, food systems, and the global communities. These outputs, as you heard yesterday, are starting to fill in the innovation pipeline of the Legume Lab, which is now in its third year. And this could be potentially game-changing development technologies. We are seeing advanced cowpea breeding lines with desirable traits as an example. Knowledge and management practices such as integrated pest management control tools in the future in your smartphones, or evidence-based research findings, including market system strategies and policies that will affect producers, buyers, consumers, and other economic development players and agents. Through effective and strategic outreach initiatives, these research outputs can then be transferred to end users, for example, to our farmers and consumers in the legume systems value chain, and encourage scaling and adoption, thus contributing to long-term outcomes and the global food security goals of USAID. You will note that the cross-cutting themes are at the center of the lab's TOC. The CLA feedback loops of collaboration, learning, and adoption with recognition of the culture, processes, and resources are essential to producing results I've mentioned, as well as the results for the cross-cutting theme areas. Projects funded under the Legume Lab address 5 cross-cutting themes. These include gender, human institutional capacity development, or HICD for short, youth, nutrition, and resilience into their activities. I ask you to please visit this link below for more detailed information and description of each of these themes. So how is the lab mainstreaming these cross-cutting issues? In the field of international development, mainstreaming a cross-cutting issue is generally understood as a strategy to make that theme an integral dimension of the organizational design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of policies and programs. It also implies that relevant analyses are conducted as a basis for such integration. The cross-cutting theme strategy for the lab involves an iterative process, as shown in this slide, of integrating competitive priorities, objectives, and action plans, which encompasses top-down planning and bottom-up learning, shown in the previous slide. The major focus was on the careful design and implementation of rubrics, or scoring tools to be able for us to assess the readiness and capacity of the projects before additional support is provided by the lab to address the cross-cutting themes and achieve the greatest impact. Results serve as baseline information on cross-cutting themes for these projects and the capture of cross-cutting theme performance metrics and indicators. These assessments also inform outreach and education initiatives and follow-up consultations. Gap areas that were identified resulted in a design of call for concept notes and additional technical assistance and capacity grants from the lab's management entity. It is also worth noting that beyond ensuring the integration of capacity development across cross-cutting themes, the purpose of this initiative is the design of a resilience framework to support the global legume value chain. A dynamic M&E dashboard, which is shown here, has also been created to capture data and information on cross-cutting theme milestones. To assist projects in identifying strategies and interventions to further incorporate these themes into the various research projects, the lab established the Resilience Resource Team, or RRT for short, which is the first of its kind for Feed the Future innovation labs. The RRT is composed of advisors in each of the cross-cutting areas, plus monitoring and evaluation and project management experts. RRT reports to the management entity and is composed of myself as lead, David DeYoung covering for project management, Dr. John Medendorp as our HICD and youth advisor, Dr. Andrea Allen as gender advisor, and Dr. Deepa Tyagarajan as our nutrition advisor. Previously, Dr. Leps Maleta advised for youth programming. Today, we are also going to hear from these advisors, and they will share some milestones and important lessons on mainstreaming cross-cutting issues by the lab. Dr. Allen will present some of our current successes and initial lessons in gender integration, which to date is better documented than other cross-cutting themes. Dr. John Medendorp will close this session with additional quantitative progress updates and other important developments on mainstreaming cross-cutting areas by the Legume Lab. So with that, I hope that this overview has given you some key points related to lab's efforts in mainstreaming cross-cutting issues. We wish to thank USAID for supporting these efforts of the lab and our partners. Welcome again to this session.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever and whenever you may be. Thank you to Jane and to other members of the Resilience Resource Team for the opportunity to showcase the bruchid-resistant bean team's work to build a gender-responsive breeding program in Southern Africa. Please note that all credit for advances shared during this presentation go to the team. However, any errors or failings of this presentation are mine alone. I will be sharing 4 phases of actions carried out to date and plans for the way forward. First, a brief backstory on the fundamental research design and later enhancements. Second, building customized capacity together with the GREAT program. Third, the evolving work plan and timeline for building a gender-responsive breeding program in Southern Africa. And fourth, results and measurement. First, a quick word on the background in this research project. This case features the work of the Legume System Innovation Lab commissioned activity designed for genetic improvement of dry beans for bruchid resistance, most immediately in Malawi, Mozambique, and Zambia. Lacking the time to properly introduce each member of our research team, I would nevertheless like to highlight the role of Dr. Juan Osorno, lead PI in this initiative, who together with the co-PIs listed here in black font have each contributed significantly to this initiative. Additionally, the host country gender focal persons listed here in orange font have more recently joined the team in capacity and work planning efforts to date, making key contributions along the way. During the Resilience Resource Team's early review of this research project design and associated theory of change, we discussed ways that the already gender-sensitive research design, as noted in green font, can transition into a fully gender-responsive breeding program with the addition of dimensions highlighted in red font. Some of you may recall this diagram from my presentation in SALI last year. Here, a continuum of development approaches span left to right, beginning on the left with gender harmful practices and moving right to gender neutral and sensitive, and on to gender responsive and transformative. While transformative results are likely outside our sphere of influence, we can create gender responsive plant breeding programs, which assure that a significant portion of the varietal traits developed meet the needs of both men and women producers. For example, researchers in Western Kenya determined that in general men were more likely to trade off tolerance of climatic variations with marketability and select a highly marketable variety even when its yield was not the best. On the contrary, women put more weight on tolerance to climatic variations than on marketability when selecting varieties during their participatory varietal selection. Women were less likely to select KATB1 because of its poor productivity, despite its excellent market traits. If the product profiles for the final product development do indeed reflect these considerations, then the program becomes gender responsive. What this means to the development of bruchid-resistant bean varieties in Southern Africa is continuing to unfold. And towards this end, our Southern Africa Bean team was awarded a cross-cutting theme mini grant from the Legume Systems Innovation Lab, funding the launch of this program's transition to a gender-responsive breeding program, beginning at the activity level with capacity building. We have been very fortunate to engage the Program for Gender-Responsive Researchers equipped for agricultural transformation, known simply by its acronym GREAT, a collaboration between Cornell and Makerere universities. Funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, GREAT Team Experience includes working with researchers at multiple CG research centers, national agricultural research organizations, nonprofits, and others. The bruchid-resistant bean team and I took our initial work plan based on preliminary research and team experience, and we asked for great capacity building specifically focused on gender-responsive work planning for this project. The GREAT team, led by Dr. Margaret Mangani of Makerere University, in turn assessed our team's current capacity via a pre-course questionnaire. Then, based on findings, GREAT suggested the addition of some preliminary work on gender equality and women's empowerment before jumping into the work planning activity, and hence this list of topics covered. Our workshop took place via one pre-course module delivered as videos in a resource file. The following live session on Zoom lasted 3 half days, comprising less than half of the GREAT course usual span of topics, due to our schedules and the need to be completely online during these COVID times. Our Bean team found this experience quite valuable regardless. GREAT houses a strong team of trainers well informed in the scholarly literature per this recent publication by Dr. Eva Weltsian, plant breeder and collaborator within the CG System Gender and Breeding Initiative and a key presenter throughout our workshop. The GREAT team was also able to integrate recent advances on gender and plant breeding documented in the gray literature, which appears to be booming as well. One highlight of the workshop involved learning about key aspects of the gender responsive product profile development tool, which has been designed to fit seamlessly into mainstream CG System excellence in breeding product profile tool development, thereby assuring that gender dimensions are always part of the analysis of breeding goals and trait prioritization for the CG system. This G+ product profile tool, as it is commonly known, includes 2 components, each fitting nicely into the standard sequencing of breeding program activities as illustrated in this table. The first component, the G+ customer profile, provides an analytical framework to facilitate gender-responsive definition of customer segments, including agroecological and social differences, and their intersection with women and men's preferences for attributes of the product involved. In this case, the bruchid-resistant dry beans. Data feeding into this framework can be gleaned from existing data sets and supplemented with new data collected in surveys, focus groups, participatory varietal selections, and so on. The resulting customer profile, in turn, helps guide researcher queries in constructing the second component, the G+ product profile tool, which assures that the overall research program's product profiles are indeed gender responsive. To add a quick footnote here, I noticed that recent work on gender responsive green breeding in sub-Saharan Africa focuses mainly on East African countries and does not utilize the G+ tool set. And thus the team continues to use, thus our team plans to use the latest field tested version of this tool, which we expect to see out any day now, to update and add our knowledge to our knowledge of gender-based varietal selection preferences in current day Southern Africa. And hence the first step moving forward involves construction of a relevant G+ customer profiles for the Zambia bean region, then on to Malawi and Mozambique. We begin with a deep dive into locally available data and related reports in order to construct draft customer profiles, then identify data gaps to be filled with original research, surveys, focus group data, and the like. This specific set of activities has been designed to integrate gender responsive data collection, analysis, and continued capacity building at key points throughout the project timeline. Thinking back to the project's theory of change as shared earlier, we began our efforts to strengthen the gender response of this breeding program at the activity level, with the intention of building researcher capacity in this area. Indicators noted by a check mark here have been measured, while those noted by a question mark still need to be finalized with the team, and additional funds must be procured to fully implement the envisioned gender responsive breeding program in the coming months. Ultimately, team members continue to keep their eyes on the prize of the end goal of this breeding program, the increased food security through adoption of bruchid-resistant common beans varieties available and utilized by women, men, young producers, and other value chain actors. While the work of this research team is positioned well upstream of the end goal, thus making measurement of our impact in the near term infeasible during the life of the project, that is, a gender responsive breeding program can nevertheless remove barriers and strengthen the possibility that resulting research products will, at the least, do no harm, and at best, make an equitable and empowering impact for the producers involved, both women and men. If you'd like to know more about this topic, I've provided a list of references here at the end, and I thank you for your attention, and please feel free to contact me for additional information.
Joining us, everyone. Glad that you could be with us today. For the next few minutes, we would like to give you an update on the first round of the cross-cutting issue grants that were made last year. But before we do, we want to say just a few words about our approach to resilience. As we know, resilience is the ability to sustain shocks in systems. And there are several component parts to resilience. There are the economic pieces of resilience. There are the policy pieces of resilience. All of those are very important, but they tend to get attention in the way that international development projects are implemented. There are some neglected components of resilience that are not as obvious, but are just as vital. And it's those that we focus on in the lab. As you can see, those consist of gender-sensitive approaches to legume systems, also capacity development, both on the individual level, but also in terms of organizations and institutions. And finally, in nutrition. All three of these are important component parts of resilience. Without them, resilience cannot be achieved or sustained over time. And so we stress these in our cross-cutting issue grants. Just to give you a quick review of the grants that were issued under the first round, we have the Ohio State University grant, which is focusing on the nutritional content of the optimal shrub system cowpeas to see whether or not the OSS in fact delivers higher nutritional content. The second one is the nutritional capacity development for researchers. This is under Melinda Smalley's project in equipping her research to understand those nutritional components. The third one is gender-sensitive trait selection for the common bean. This is Juan Osorno's project at North Dakota State University, introducing the bruchid-resistant bean in Southern Africa, and they have already actually implemented their grant. The University of California, Riverside is also looking at nutritional analysis and trait selection for cowpea in Senegal and Ghana. And then finally, IITA received a grant to improve the capacity of farmers to use the farmer interface app that they've developed for some of the pests and diseases that affect the local farmers' crops. As I mentioned, Ohio State University is looking at the optimal shrub system to see whether or not it can actually deliver improved nutritional value through the cropping system that they are introducing. And as I mentioned, the project that's looking at fertilizer subsidies in West Africa, including the gender and youth components, they are using these funds to look at the crop diversity and diet quality as critical components of food security, including both cowpea production and consumption aspects. So these grants were given and were able to actually improve the implementation of the projects through these supporting cross-cutting issue funds that allowed them to expand their project's reach beyond their original proposals. So we want to say a big thank you to all of the project teams for what they've done. Obviously, you're the ones who are in the field and who are doing the work. We're here in a supporting role, but we want to encourage you to look at ways in which you could use these cross-cutting grants in order to support your project in the field. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, John and Andrea. Before we move into the Q&A session, let's check first what's going on with our polls here. And by the way, for those who just joined in, welcome. This is Jane Payumo, the Monitoring and Evaluation Lead for the Legume Systems Research Innovation Lab. And the poll related to the Resilience Resource Team here is, how well do you feel that your project is addressing the cross-cutting issues of gender, nutrition, youth, and capacity development? And most of you, thank you for all of those who participated in this poll. And most of you, and many of you, said that you are all doing okay, but you feel that you could do more. So I think this session is very timely because we have our cross-cutting theme experts here. They were introduced today, and with that, I'd like to open now the session for Q&A. So at this point, thank you, John, Deepa, and Andrea for opening your cameras right away so that our participants can see you. And let's look at the questions now, and which one got the most votes? Let's see. All right. So the first question, I guess I can throw this to John. Be ready. Impressive RRT framework and approach. Are this all full FTE? That was asked by our participant, Jan Middendorf. And before you answer that, maybe I'll also ask you the second question in the spirit of time here. What is the lab's key ingredient for mainstreaming or integrating cross-cutting issues?
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Those are really good questions. So in response to Jan's question first, Jan, I think you're probably referring to those who are working on the project. Let me tell you a little bit about the way that we've structured this. None of our experts are full-time. We buy out a portion of their time. They're on faculty at Michigan State University. So we grab a piece of their time, and they are available to the projects both as a resource, but then also in some cases as an implementer. So in the case, for example, of the project in Southern Africa that Andrea did in conjunction with North Dakota State University, Andrea worked as in part as an implementer of that project as well. So we pay the salaries of those that are bought out for the lab's work and for these cross-cutting issue support grants. And then also we bear any expenses related to those grants so that the grant goes fully to the implementation. The management entity supports it through personnel and also through the financial component so that those don't have to be piled onto the grant implementers, but rather the grant goes fully toward the implementation. So it's kind of a unique structure, but it makes available to all of the teams with which we work a high level expertise team that is able to supplement the work that they're doing, because we know that most of the implementers, most of the PIs and their project teams don't have expertise in these areas. Some of them do have some experts available to them, but for the most part, they need the help of experts in implementing these aspects of their projects. So we make ourselves available to them. We support them not only with the HICD, or excuse me, the cross-cutting issue projects that they have already implemented or included in their grant proposal, but also we help them through a review of their project. We call it an audit, where we go through each one of the cross-cutting issues and we discuss with them how they might be able to enhance it. And then based on that, they're given the opportunity to apply for grants. So the very short answer is no, there is no full-time equivalent, but rather we buy out a portion of the experts' time and the experts are made available to the various implementation teams. And I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything to that. Andrea or Deepa, you're both involved in projects. Any thoughts?
I think you covered it well, John. Thanks.
And then the second question you asked, Jane, is what is the key ingredient for mainstreaming or integrating cross-cutting issues? Once again, I think probably the most important thing in the innovation labs is understanding that the PIs often don't have the expertise that they need in order to be able to implement these projects effectively. They have goodwill. They recognize the importance of each one of these cross-cutting components, but nevertheless, they don't have themselves the expertise to be able to do it. So making available to them experts who are able to guide them through the issues and then also help them design interventions that would in some way improve the reach of their project in these cross-cutting areas. I think that's probably the key, Jane, the fact that we make this expertise available to them at no cost to them as a project. And then if they have a good design of an implementable project, then we can fund that with the cross-cutting issue grants. And once again, I'll turn it back over to Andrea and Deepa to see if you have any further thoughts on that.
So thanks, John, and well noted. So we only have 3 more minutes for Q&A, and I'd like to remind everyone that the session for today, we have a code of 2D. So if you have more questions related to Resilience Resource Team, please feel free to put them in the Q&A tab here in Whova. So I have another question here, and I can maybe I'll ask this to Andrea. Are there important lessons now in terms of opportunities, constraints, challenges that our lab can now share to our participants today in terms of mainstreaming or integrating cross-cutting issues? And you can focus on gender. You can also, if you want to intersect with the other cross-cutting issues as well. So Andrea?
Thank you, Jane, and I appreciate that question. I can't speak for the entire team, but I suspect that my experience learning on gender may reflect some of their other lessons as well. Based on collaboration with the bruchid-resistant bean team in Southern Africa and the new evidence emerging on gender-responsive research approaches, I think that there's a lot we could do with providing additional guidance at the release of a request for proposals, and also budgeting. But I think that we know enough now to provide additional guidance on technical content, staffing, and budgeting, and provide that guidance. It's going to be different in different countries. And one of the primary things for gender approach is really helping folks identify a local gender expert point person. So I don't know if anybody else wants to respond on how that affects their particular cross-cutting dimension.
Jane, I think we're coming close to the end, right? So we can save our remarks to put on the Hoover platform, perhaps?
Yep, indeed. So our time is up for the Resilience Resource Team, and we have a couple more questions that came in. And please check the Q&A and some of the answers to your questions there. But that ends our Resilience Resource Team session. And over to you, Doreen.
Thank you, Jane, and members of the RRT. This concludes today's public session of the Legume Systems Innovation Lab's Virtual Convening 2021 Day 2. If you have not yet participated in today's poll on what prepared legumes products are missing from your marketplace, please take a minute to do so. To review any of today's pre-recorded presentations, click on the Research tab on the Hoover page. Also, check out the community feature where you can engage with our other attendees and find additional resource materials. Our presenters will also work to provide written responses to all questions addressed during their presentations. Look for their answers in their session Q&A feature. Also, feel free to contact them via the Hoover messaging feature. We look forward to having you join us for tomorrow's session, which begins at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. A reminder to our project-affiliated attendees, the continuing closed program session will begin at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time today. The public session concludes with the post-live montage.